So, for those viewers that don't know Melissa, Melissa is a Singaporean journalist who's an expert in world geopolitics, and you've been on all sorts of places and lots of big news shows, Joe Rogan, and you write for the Spectator and other places as well. So, you are probably going to be far more expert than us lot to tell us all about the Trump election. So, it's great to have you here and to have your insight.
What this is one of the most amazing redemption arcs or comeback stories I think anywhere, let alone in politics. I'm hearing that this is also unprecedented that somebody who lost an election actually comes back to win the presidency for the second term, and it could only be a figure that was larger than life, and it had to be someone like Trump.
Mm.
It's the fallout from this election. I see all the think pieces now that are dominating our discourse. I see think pieces blaming Latino men. They're
Mm.
starting to get blamed because I think they shifted. I know that Miami-Dade, which is the county in Florida, looks like that was a county that Joe Biden won the last time, 53%, and it's went to Trump. So there's a big shift in the Latino vote, and in particular, they're singling out Latino men. I just did a tongue-in-cheek post about welcoming them to the white supremacy club because the Asians and Jews are already there, and it just seems like white supremacy these days is a very diverse phenomenon. They're also blaming men because there is a quite clear gender divide in this election, and this also played out very symbolically in kind of the social media world, where you had Kamala going on very female centric podcasts and uh,
Mm.
podcasts like Call Her Daddy, and also she was interacting with people like Oprah, but she wouldn't go on Joe Rogan. And
Mm.
Trump was, of course, very comfortable in the Manosphere podcasts. He went on Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan, and Andrew Schultz, which is a very well known comedian here in New York. So you kind of see this kind of play out symbolically as well. And turns out it's overriding on a very real phenomenon, and it's showing up in the data as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how race and sex have played into this election. And, I've heard a lot of women saying, I don't want to vote for Trump. He is a misogynist. He's a convicted felon. He's not for women. But I don't know if you saw, Melissa, that Megyn Kelly speech that she gave at one of his last rallies in Pennsylvania, where she made the case as a woman why women should be voting for Trump. So I'm just wondering, where do you think this idea comes from that Trump is anti-women?
I think it's coming from this idea that Trump's rhetoric is just very hateful.
Mm.
They've played up his comments when that Hollywood Access tape went viral, where he says grab them by the pussy. And of course they kind of ignored the first part where he said they let you grab them by the pussy. Sounds very crass. And Trump, of course, then said, this is just locker room talk, it's banter. Well, if you have male relatives and friends and cousins, you know that that's kind of how males socialize. They tend to just take the mickey out of each other all the time, and whatever they can find, whether it's somebody's looking tired or fat, they will pick on you, and that's just how they bond. And a lot of the Republican media, the Democratic media, actually ended up seizing on this idea that Trump's rhetoric is just very hateful and divisive, and they leaned into it because women tend to prefer kind of kind, polite rhetoric, and this kind of
Mm.
thing really works them up. And so I think it convinced them that Trump was someone who's very hateful. And of course, this was also accompanied by the very real fear of the abortion rights being eroded by the Republicans. So
Mm.
it turns out that abortion was one of the hot button issues. It's if you looked at what voters were voters who care most about how they voted, the topic that they did, the Democrats overwhelmingly cared about this democracy, and abortion. Those were the things they voted on. And the Republicans mostly cared about immigration and the economy.
Yeah, yeah. And just for you, Melissa, I'm going to presume that you voted for Trump. And if so, what were the main reasons why you were compelled to vote for him?
So I cannot vote in this country because I'm just a permanent resident.
Okay, if
I'm a
you could
green
have
card
voted.
holder. Yeah, I definitely would have preferred Trump. But for me, I'm actually a voter that is quite my concern is actually quite rare because most voters don't actually vote on foreign policy. I think it's the last thing that they actually care about when you look at the exit polls. But for me, the federal government impacts foreign policy and geopolitics more than anything else. It's more of the down ballot stuff, voting for your state representatives and your city representatives really affect your day-to-day lives. No, that's it though. There are some policies that, for example, I think Kamala had talked about price controls or like taxing unrealized gains that could have had a very real impact on your daily life and your personal purse strings. But for the most part, for me, I actually care most about geopolitics and foreign policy, and Trump in that regard was more preferable. And the reason I say that is because we've had 4 years of Trump, and we've seen how he actually sorry deals with this issue. He's kind of brought a lot of stability to the Middle East with the Abraham Accords. And, the line that he keeps parroting, which is, yes, for 4 years, we've had no wars. We've had, under him, he had not started any wars. The Biden pullout of Afghanistan was just such a stark reminder of what happens when you have a government presiding over one of the biggest, most embarrassing foreign policy failures in recent memory, just the images of people hanging off aircraft alone. So the other issue, I think, that is one of the most defining geopolitical fissure is the China issue. And Kamala, for her part, has kind of not really weighed in. Nobody really knows what her China policy was going to be. She's an unknown in this theater versus we know that Trump actually was ahead of most people. He single-handedly changed the consensus that was surrounding American foreign policy for decades. We were in engagement mode until Trump in 2018, in the middle of his term, started escalating rhetoric, started talking about the need to actually impose trade tariffs to rebalance the trade deficit with China, and he started doing that. He did attract a lot of flack for actually, I saw some media reports calling him xenophobic and racist in terms of his rhetoric towards China. But then after COVID, when that hit America, I think everybody kind of saw that when we needed PPE and all our supply chains were just caught in China, and America was unable to get medicines, and we suddenly realized that it seemed to be a strategic mistake to have supply chains for very critical needs located in a geopolitical adversary because they could just choke it off at any point. I think America woke up during that time, and to that extent, that Trump has really shifted the conversation on China and has shown a very strong record of being of countering the China threat.
Yeah, really interesting as a geopolitics expert to hear your perspective on that, because one of the reasons why, for example, I'm in favour of Trump is because I think that he is a better negotiator. I trust him far more speaking with the likes of Putin and dictators around the world. I really wouldn't trust Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, who can't seem to get a sentence out of her mouth that makes any sense to those of us that have English as our first language, let alone some leader in another country trying to make sense of what she's trying to say. But a lot of people, really interestingly, they say why they're against Trump is because they are scared that he will start wars. They're scared that he's cozying up to China and Russia. It's really interesting. So to hear your perspective on that is great. But just moving on slightly, we saw that Kamala Harris had a lot of celebrity endorsements. I mean, she had Beyonce come and join her on the stage. So many people, Taylor Swift, who we know has a huge following, endorsing her, and also the mainstream media being behind Kamala Harris. Do you think that those didn't really have much impact, those celebrity backings and the media backing her? Or do you think that they did have an impact, but it just wasn't enough to get her across the line?
I think that it might have actually backfired. And I say that
Okay.
because the contempt that the American public has for out of touch elites um, very much is prevalent in
Mm.
among the Hollywood class. For the last 4 years during the BLM Antifa riots, you had and defund the police kind of movements. You had a lot of celebrities like Seth Rogen come out and say, who cares about these the high crime rates? Just but of course, people who are tweeting about this, who are actors in Hollywood, they
Mm.
live in gated communities, and the contrast between the environments they live in, the lifestyles they lead, and the average American just couldn't be sharper. So they appear out of touch. They are very alienated from the basic needs of regular Americans. Yet they have the audacity to kind of lecture Americans. There were these ads of supporting Kamala, imploring people to vote blue by the Avengers actors. They all these ads that would go viral on Twitter, and people just commenting on how out of touch they all seem. You had famous celebrities that they used the Kamala campaign actually used to re-launder her image in the press. I think it was a British pop star. It was Charlie XCX that was one of the first attempts at this that was very successful. You had Kamala's Brett trending, these bright green colors everywhere, memes, dances on TikTok, and they actually somehow made her look like a cool wine mom that's a little, crazy. And the picture you paint of someone like that actually negotiating with Putin or Kim Jong Un is quite stark. But in the moment, to a Gen Z crowd that is very much used to TikTok virality, this is quite appealing. And so initially, I was actually quite worried that the Hollywood endorsements would move things. But right after Taylor Swift's endorsement, which she actually piggybacked, because on the divide that was caused by JD Vance when he said crazy cat ladies were the main voting bloc, she signed her letter that way, and you clearly saw the beginnings of what was going to be a new line in the culture war. It didn't seem to move anything, and so I think this out of touch Hollywood elite has actually their support for Kamala Harris actually totally backfired.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. I think Kamala Harris was seen as the establishment candidate, and I think what you say is right there, that having all of these celebrities, which people would consider to be part of the establishment, the elites, probably backing her probably didn't help. Now, Donald Trump had someone very famous supporting him, that being Elon Musk, who perhaps is considered not quite obviously he's a very, very rich man, but not considered quite part of the elite and the establishment. Now, Elon Musk has he bought Twitter and has made sure that everyone's got free speech on there. Not only did he make sure that people had free speech during the election, but Elon Musk was, of course, backing Trump, tweeting constantly. A lot of those tweets going really, really viral. Now, before Elon Musk purchased Twitter, now X, I mean, Donald Trump didn't even have an active account on there. He was banned from the platform. So I'm just wondering, Melissa, how much do you think that Elon Musk and X as a platform helped Donald Trump win this election?
I think it was a massive factor. In this election cycle, the American people finally had access to a social media platform that was that they were confident that there was no shenanigans. I mean, this is riding on the back of the Twitter files, where it was revealed that the Biden administration had colluded with intelligence officials, and got them to request social media platforms to have censorship policies and to take down certain accounts, to take down certain posts. We saw that with COVID misinformation, that there was this going on. And so when you have a media that is essentially a vertically integrated messaging apparatus for the Democrats, the social media platforms become the place where regular people would go to get unfiltered opinion. And this election could very well be defined by this new draining of power from legacy media. We saw memes explode all over Twitter, where you had in the last week alone, I saw memes about McDonald's and garbage trucks, and a squirrel, and this the discourse was almost happening in a completely different format, all away from the studios of CNN. That Kamala Harris was trying to negotiate with Joe Rogan, which I think was a very big mistake on her part, not to even try to go and meet him halfway. In the end, she basically demanded Joe Rogan travel to her and only do 1 hour. Nobody does that to Joe Rogan. Like, it's really hard to get on that podcast. And instead, she's just kept to friendly media. So all this playing out really shows how big X being freed from the old regime really had an impact, I think. And Elon himself, who is, he is somebody who the Democrats used to love. He's done so much for humanity, with his car company, Tesla. Greening, right? This is part of the Democrats love the environment, and that's something that they care about a lot. And so you would imagine that they would embrace a man like Elon, who has done so much on that front, and also just dreamed big and took a whole new approach to lowering the cost of space travel. But his singular devotion to free speech and Twitter, I think, has alienated most of them.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's really interesting how much of an impact we really could have Kamala Harris in the White House again if it weren't for Elon Musk saving the day with X potentially. So really, really interesting, and that is really interesting how lots of lifelong Democrats like Elon Musk, RFK Jr., etc., have made the switch over. They've seen the light. They're absolutely fed up of the Democrats after many years of supporting them. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Melissa. It's been really fantastic to hear your thoughts on the election.
Thank you. Thank you, Chloe. It's also interesting that, he's starting to care about the UK speech issue too. So, crossing my fingers.
Well, this is the thing is Elon Musk, for example, I mean, when we had Keir Starmer here in the UK advocating people being put in prison for Facebook posts when we had riots breaking out, a lot of us felt like Elon Musk was our last hope, the one man standing up for us. He was on Twitter attacking Keir Starmer for what he was doing for people in Britain, and he continues to make tweets when he sees stuff going on in Britain that is anti-free speech. So he's a great voice for both sides of the pond, I think.
Totally agree.
Thank you so much for joining us, Melissa. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.